Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our informational webinar on the Draft Tribal Early Childhood Facilities Combined Application Guide. My name is Moshmi Beltengady. I'm the Division Director for the Tribal Early Childhood Division in the Office of Early Childhood Development here at the Administration for Children and Families. And we're really excited that you've joined us today as we walk through a new draft resource that was developed collaboratively by ACF's Office of Childcare, Office of Head Start, and Office of Early Childhood Development. We're really excited about this new draft resource and process, and just excited to share with you what we've developed so far and hear from you over the next couple of months about whether this is hitting the mark or how we can continue to improve this draft and process. So you'll hear us say many times today that this is a draft resource, and we're sharing it with you today so that we can continue to identify opportunities to improve it, this draft itself, and then the process that we'll be using to receive applications and review and approve them. So this draft resource, the Draft Tribal Early Childhood Facilities Combined Application Guide, will allow Tribal Child Care and Development Fund, tribal lead agencies, and American Indian Alaska Native Head Start grant recipients to apply to OHS and OCC jointly to use Child Care and Development Fund and Head Start resources to construct or improve early childhood facilities. And so we intend that today's webinar will help you to understand what's being proposed and support you to submit comments on this draft and share suggestions for improvement. This is not an official training to support you in completing an application, as the guide is currently in draft form. I'd also like to note at the outset that this is not a new funding opportunity, and it's not intended as a new set of requirements. This is really an effort to streamline and improve current processes to support more coordination, collaboration, and cut federal red tape. Next slide. So I'm really excited to be joined today by colleagues from the Office of Early Childhood Development, the Office of Childcare, and the Office of Head Start that you see here on this slide. You'll be hearing from each of them today as we review this draft combined application guide, and people will introduce themselves as we move through the webinar today. So I won't take a lot of time going through each of the folks you'll hear from. Next slide. So the focus of our webinar today is to ensure that you and your partners have the information you need to support your review of the draft combined application guide or guide, so that you can share comments and feedback on the draft before the deadline of January 23rd, 2024. We will discuss the intended purpose and background of the guide, providing some context for how and why we developed it. We will briefly walk through the requirements and structure of the guide to support your review. We'll talk about how to submit comments and feedback, and then we'll wrap up with our timeline, next steps, and answer any clarifying questions you may have. Now I would like to introduce our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development, Katie Ham, who will provide some remarks on the purpose of this new resource. Next slide. Katie?
Thanks so much. Hi, thanks so much, Moshimi. We can go ahead to the next slide. So I want to start just by thanking everyone for being here today. I know as we get towards the end of the year, there's a lot of work to wrap up and a lot of eagerness to hopefully take some time off to spend with loved ones. So appreciate everyone jumping on. I also want to thank the ACF team that worked on developing this proposed guide. And I especially want to thank our tribal members and those from tribal organizations who are joining us today. As you all know, this is a partnership between the federal government and our tribal nations. So we really, really depend on the feedback that we get from you, which is why we go through this public comment period. So we're hoping that you will take a look at the guide and really give us that feedback that we need to finalize this and make this a useful tool. We embarked on this process to develop a combined application guide with the goal of cutting red tape, and that really picks up on a lot of priorities for the Biden-Harris administration. We are trying to be better nation-to-nation partners with tribes. We are trying to make federal programs and federal funding more accessible to the public, improving customer service, And we also have an executive order that was signed last April that's focused on increasing access to high quality care and supporting caregivers. So this effort really hits on all of those topics. But one of the specific things mentioned in that executive order was a streamlined process for tribal facilities when tribes are trying to use both childcare and Head Start funds. So this executive order, it's really a whole of government effort. It's not only HHS, it's the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, the Veterans Affairs Administration. It's really all of us coming together. And this is one of the ways where we really want to better support tribes in creating early childhood facilities. I know as I have traveled around the country, I've had the pleasure of touring a number of early childhood facilities with tribes, and it's just amazing to see the space, the outdoor space, the indoor space, how much of a focus there is on culture and really making early childhood programs a place where children can experience their culture, experience their language, where families, multi-generational families are welcome. So it's really an honor to do what we can in the time that we have to make this process a little bit easier so that we can have more tribal facilities that are meeting the needs of our children and families in Indian country. Um, if we want to go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about a little bit more specifically about this effort. We're trying to provide a roadmap that will streamline the process and reduce the burden for tribes so that they can more easily braid Head Start and Child Care and Development Fund funds to meet the needs of children living in tribal communities and make sure that those environments are responsive and reflective of the community. I also want to acknowledge that we know we aren't all the way there yet. As I said earlier, we want to hear from you. What more can we do to simplify and streamline these processes and requirements? Some of you all have been through this process, or you have colleagues who have. Tell us what would make it easier. What supports would help you to continue to invest in the development and improvement of facilities that support tribal children growing and learning in safe, healthy, and culturally rich environments? And tell us how we can be better partners in this. So we really look forward to hearing from you about how we can continue improving this processes and resources. We want to know what supports and how to make it better. So thank you again for taking the time to join us. I'm going to pass it back to Moshimi to jump into more specifics.
Thank you, Katie. Next slide. All right. Thank you for that, Katie. And I think it definitely is just so important to acknowledge, how important these facilities are to tribal communities for educating your children, for connecting them to their culture, to their language, and to really promoting the health and well-being of young children and families. So we know how meaningful these facilities are to you all, and we're just excited about this opportunity to work with you all to improve the processes that we have in place. So before we dig into the actual content of the draft guide, I wanted to share a little more context of the overall approach. As I mentioned, we note that there is opportunity to align our processes because we know that tribal CCDF and American Indian Alaska Native Head Start facilities projects often touch children served by both Head Start and CCDF. The applications that tribal CCDF lead agencies and AIN Head Start programs submit for facilities projects are similar in many ways, but not identical. The application content is somewhat different, although generally very similar. And ACF staff have similar but not identical review processes, and that we're working to balance the need to ensure that federal interest and real property requirements are met while also trying to minimize applicant burden. Next slide. And while we'll note that there are many similarities, there are also some key differences in the processes that each program office uses to review and approve tribal facilities applications. So while we've worked to identify opportunities to streamline process and content, we recognize that CCDF and Head Start are inherently very different programs with very different statutory and regulatory requirements that apply to each program. And we really need your input through comments in the Federal Register and in our upcoming listening session that I'll talk about later on how we can keep improving our processes, even in the context of these very different programs, to make the process work better for everyone. So CCDF, Child Care and Development Fund, is a formula-based block grant, while Head Start is a discretionary program, which leads to some procedural and logistical differences. In CCDF, tribes set aside funds that are already appropriated, while in Head Start, recipients typically request one-time funding for facilities projects, and those are funded based on OHS priorities and availability of funds. CCDF does not allow for facilities purchase, while Head Start does. There's also some key statutory and regulatory differences across the programs that I'm not going to go into here. All of this adds up to the opportunity to streamline and combine requirements, balanced with the need to retain and adhere to program-specific requirements. Next slide. Okay, with that context and background, we're going to take some time to dive into the content of the draft guide. We just want to make you aware of what is in the guide so that you'll feel better prepared to comment on how it can be improved, either at the listening session or in response to Federal Register notice. And once again, this is not a really in-depth training on how to complete the application because it's still a draft guide that we really want your feedback on. And I want to note again that this guide is intended to support those projects where applicants are proposing jointly funded Head Start and CCDF projects, so projects that are using both funding sources. So if you're not proposing a jointly funded project, you would continue to follow current processes for the Office of Head Start or the Office of Child Care, respectively. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Fergus from the Office of Child Care to start walking us through the application guide. Lisa?
Thanks, Moshami. Hi, everyone. And as Moshami mentioned, I'm Lisa Fergus. I'm a Senior Tribal Program Specialist within the Office of Child Care Program Operations Division. So we wanted to just share with you some of the contents of this guide. There are 5 main sections in the guide, which we'll take an opportunity to walk through. So the first section is the background, and it discusses the why OCC and OHS developed this guide.
Can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry.
Thank you, Moshami. The next is the overview, which discusses the purpose, the applicability, and the limitations of this draft guide. The purpose is to streamline the process for tribal CCDF lead agencies and AIAN Head Start programs when submitting a joint application to use both CCDF and Head Start funds to purchase, build, renovate, or improve early care and education facilities in their respective tribal communities. The third area is the combined application process. This section focuses on the steps in the application development, submission, and the review process. The fourth is the longest section by far. It has 3 subsections that detail the requirements for the narrative, the cost estimates, and supporting documentation. And then finally, we have the appendices and resources, which include both key terms and definitions and additional instructions for projects that are proposing to purchase modular facilities. We're going to delve deeper into these subjects in the upcoming slides, but we're first going to look at the combined application process. Next slide, please. The combined application process section outlines at a very high level the process for developing and submitting your combined application to ACF, and it also provides some tips and reminders to support the development and submission of the combined application. The first step to this process is for CCDF tribal lead agencies and AIAN Head Start programs to initiate a planning and pre-consultation with OCC and OHS. During this time, it's an opportunity to discuss the proposed facilities activities with both your regional program specialist and grant management specialist before proceeding too far into the planning process. The pre-consultation is an opportunity to discuss the feasibility and timeline for the project, any implications for program enrollment, health and safety, what is the overall project need, as well as the funding sources that will be used to support both project planning and the completion of the project. We'd like to note that Head Start and CCDF funds can be used for reasonable cost and fees associated with the planning of a facilities project. As mentioned before, Head Start recipients can submit a written request for one-time funds for planning cost or use available grant funds, whereas the tribal CCDF lead agencies may use your regular CCDF allotment for planning, but these funds must be set aside. After the planning and pre-consultation phase, this section of the guide briefly highlights the application development process, the expectations for submitting real property standard forms, and then the application submission and review processes. I'll note that when the submission and review processes are described, that they're described briefly in this guide because, as mentioned as well, is that ACF is still working through those processes. And we look forward to sharing more information about those in the coming months. In the upcoming listening session, we'd love to hear your feedback on what a helpful process would look like. So at this time, I would like to pass it to Todd to share some of the next steps.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And good afternoon and good morning to those who may be joining us from Alaska. My name is Todd Legend-Throengel. I am the Regional Program Manager for the Office of Head Start Region 11. Today, I get the pleasure of getting us started with walking through the application requirements as they are outlined in the guide. So we can move to the next slide. We can jump to okay, so as folks can see here, there are 3 required sections in a combined application. The first being the project narrative, the second being cost estimates, which really dive into, of course, the budgetary and fiscal portions of the application, and then supporting documentation, which of course align with and support your narrative and your cost estimates. The requirements in each of these 3 sections do align with the requirements in the Tribal CCDF Program Instruction CCDF-CCDF-PI-2023-01 and with the Head Start Program Performance Standards, specifically Section 45 CFR 1303.44A1. I think it's also important to note that this isn't intended to communicate any new requirements. Really, it reflects how these requirements fit together when you propose a project that is going to be funded with both CCDF and Head Start funding streams. Also, I think it's important to note that for our CCDF recipients, this guidance does apply to both those that are direct funded CCDF recipients and CCDF recipients with a CCDF, where the CCDF funds are consolidated into an approved Public Law 102-477 plan. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the content portions of this, so we can go ahead and jump to the next slide. Thank you. So again, as folks can see, we did break this down into 3 sections. We're going to talk through each of these sections and what's required for each one. But this is a snapshot and overview of what is required within each of those 3 sections of the application. And so as you can see, the first one is the project narrative. And so we're going to go ahead and take a jump into that first. And so we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. So now we're going to spend a few minutes walking through the first required section of the combined application, which is that narrative. So the project narrative provides a concise and detailed description of the project, including what you are proposing to do and why, the summary of the current facility conditions, new conditions that would be supported through this application, so impacts and potential and proposed impacts of this facility project, and then specific details about the proposal and the project itself. So the project narrative does have 8 required subsections, and a complete application should include responses to all 8 subsections. The draft guide does highlight the information to include in the application, alongside corresponding documents that help to support to document your statements in the narrative and align with your narrative. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to my colleague from the Office of Childcare, Noelle B., who's going to begin walking us through those 8 required subsections. But before I do that, I again want to note that this isn't going to be a deep dive into these sections, so we definitely encourage folks to closely review the draft guide, and we welcome, of course, any comments or edits you have on it. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Noelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Noelle B., and I am a child care program specialist in the Office of Child Care. And if we move to the next slide, the first section in the project narrative that we'll discuss is the recipient name and contact information. And while this may seem straightforward, we have to use a little bit of our coordination here because this is a joint application per se. So we first need to identify a contact person and their name. And since we're using two funding sources, one of the recommendations is that that person either be a CCDF contact administrator or a Head Start administrator, someone who can reasonably field those questions. Later on in the application, there'll also be a cover letter that will need to be signed by the tribal chairman or another person who is designated by the organization. And at that point, it's also an acknowledgement that the tribal leadership has knowledge of the project and support for things to move forward. A tribal facility is a large endeavor, and it's very important that we have that out of the gate to make sure that all the documentation is required. Moving to the next slide, the next requirement is the need for the facility. This is going to take a little bit of background searching because it's going to ask for a current state of early childhood facilities in the area. And those facilities, they want to know which ones are existing within a reasonable distance. We've left it up to the discretion of the applicants to see how far that distance could be, but it really just gives an idea of what type of services are available for the children and families in the community. One of the also piece of information is a rationale of why those facilities would make a large impact on the community and just how far that would go. There is one piece of supporting documentation that's required for this section, and that's a statement from a realtor that attests to the lack of facilities, and that could be either a tribal real estate office or a person in the tribe who has been designated with expertise on tribal real estate. Moving to the next slide, we're going to talk about the impact of the facility on enrollment and service provisions. In many of our conversations, we've heard of wait lists or families who are unable to access quality care. And so this is really where it's able to mitigate any potential or temporary locations when a center is being built or renovated. It asks that you describe how the facility will have an impact on the number of children. And with the caveat, if there is for any reason going to be a decrease in the ability to serve the number of children, that there is a possibility to apply for a waiver. This specific portion does not have any supporting documentation, and it may be one where you'll need to definitely collaborate amongst the two programs if they don't currently have shared space. But it is a nice introduction to what the application pieces will be together to build the case for the facility. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sharia Hall, in the Office of Head Start. Sharia.
Thank you, Noelle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharia Hall, and I am the OHS Facilities Management Specialist in the Program Office Division located in Central Office. On this slide, what you are seeing is the next section of the project narrative, which addresses the location of the facility, and it's used to understand the appropriateness of the proposed project location. If we can just go to the next slide, please. In this section, you will provide a detailed description of the facility's location and share on such items as the environmental condition of the location of the proposed facility, why this location is appropriate based on the service area, how the location will impact transportation of children to the program, and how it will support collaboration with programs and social service providers. And on this slide, we list for you the corresponding documents needed for this section. Let's go to the next slide. This section of the project narrative, the proposed facility description, is used to understand the scope of the proposed project. This section addresses whether the recipient owns the land where the proposed facility will be located, as well as the facility itself, and if not, request information about the owner. This section also asks for a description of and specifications for the facility once the proposed project is completed. For projects that are proposing renovations, this section addresses the current condition of the facility and proposed renovations. Finally, The applicant will describe the intended uses of the proposed facility, including if and how the facility would be used for other purposes. Next slide, please. The sixth section of the project narrative addresses how the proposed project will support children's health, safety, and development. This section also asks for a description of the aspects of the building and physical premises that will ensure children's health and safety, including smoke detectors, storage for hazardous materials, and other safety precautions. This section also asks for assurances that the facility will comply with the applicable code requirements, which are listed in the draft guide. This section corresponds with two required supporting documents, which you can see listed on this side: the certification of facility safety from your licensed professional, as well as a phase 1 environmental site assessment. I'll turn this over back to Noel.
Thank you, Sharia. On the next slide, we show about the final piece from the project narrative, and that is about collaboration and coordination. And one of the many benefits of collaboration is it shows how well entities can partner for a common goal. So this is an area of the application where you could show the true shared resources, the partnerships that have been developed, and some of the ways that the transitions have been enhanced if the programs partner together. This could be demonstrated in a variety of ways. Some of the applications that we've received for CCDF include a letter of support. Others do testimonial. It really is left up to the tribe or the applicant's discretion on how they want to meet those requirements to demonstrate collaboration and coordination. As listed on the slide, there are only supporting documentation as needed, and that's where the creativity could definitely come into play. I'm going to turn it back over to Sharia to close us out on the project narrative.
Thank you, Noel. Next slide, please. This final last section of the project narrative addresses the project timeline, oversight, and key milestones in order to identify and mitigate potential risks and challenges and maximize project success. This section of the application will include a schedule that details each major step or activity of the construction or major renovation project, including occupancy of the facility. It includes the plans for project oversight and ensuring that HHS officials or designees have access to the facility during construction and inspection. Now, at this time, I will turn back to my colleague, Todd, to discuss the second required section of the combined facilities application, cost estimate. Todd?
Thank you so much, Sharia. So now that we've wrapped up a quick overview of the narrative portion, as Sharia stated, we're going to jump into the second section, which is the cost estimates and financing section. So we can jump to the next slide. So here, I'm not going to go into great detail. And again, I want to encourage you to review the draft guide and submit comments or suggestions as it pertains to that guide. But again, this section does include the estimate of the total cost of the proposed activity to be paid for by Head Start and CCDF, arranged by major cost category. It also includes, of course, a breakdown of estimated ongoing costs. And certainly, again, because this is a joint application process, a breakdown of the total cost of the project and what share will be paid for with CCDF funding, and what share will be paid for by Head Start funding by fiscal year, as well as any other sources of and uses of non-CCDF and non-Head Start funds. So any other funding streams that may be contributing to that project. This section also notes corresponding supporting documents to support the cost estimates and financing submission. So we can go ahead and jump into the next slide, please. Thank you. And so this slide here is going to cover the cost comparison portion of applications as applicable. So the second part of your cost estimate is this cost comparison. So applicants are required to submit an assurance that an analysis was conducted and it was determined that no available alternatives exist in the service area. So there are no other potential facilities or buildings or structures that could meet our need. If, however, that analysis identifies other potential available alternatives, applicants must conduct and submit a cost comparison. If the applicant is proposing to use Head Start funds to continue the purchase of a facility or refinancing existing debt, an additional cost comparison is required for that. And then finally, if you are proposing to purchase a modular unit, there are additional instructions for the cost comparison, and you must also refer to the Appendix 1 in the guide and follow those instructions. And so to jump a little into our next section and discuss some of the supporting documentation required, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lisa Fergus with the Office of Child Care.
Thanks, Todd. And in talking about the third section of the draft guide, this will provide a checklist of the required supporting documents that will accompany a completed application, and those are listed on the slide. I did just want to highlight a few. They, as we mentioned before, this is not a separate set of requirements or a new set of requirements, but more or less streamlining the application processes of both OCC and OHS for a joint project. So as mentioned earlier from Noel, that there would need to be a signed cover letter from your tribal leadership or their designee of the organization. Also, an SF 429, a real property form, would need to be submitted at the onset of the project. Also, the architectural designs, environmental assessments, and then proof of ownership of land ownership, as well as cost estimates. And those supporting documentations would need to be included with the application. Next slide, please. And looking at the additional information and resources, as well as appendices, you'll notice that there are 3 in the draft guide. Appendix 1 outlines the requirements and instructions related to the purchase of modular units. And the appendices 2 and 3 provide some key terms and definitions, as well as additional resources that would help to support the submission of a complete combined application. Next slide, please. We have developed a new web page that serves as a repository for all of the resources and tools to support the CCDF lead agencies and the AIAN Head Start programs to work together and to braid and layer funds to construct or improve early childhood facilities. A copy of the draft application guide can be found there, and we will also post the recording of this webinar once it's available. We will continue to post additional guidance, technical assistance, and other relevant resources as they are developed. So at this time, I'm going to pass it back to Moushami.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to Todd and Sharia and Noel. So now we're going to share about the upcoming timeline and the next steps for this work, and share a little bit about how you can submit comments and also participate in a listening session to provide feedback. Next slide. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So this slide highlights the next steps for our work, and you can see we're very early in the process. We haven't even gotten to the first next step, which is on January 11th. We'll be having a listening session that I hope many of you will join along with your colleagues to hear your feedback on the guide, as well as your suggestions and recommendations for what an ideal process would look like for submission and approval of applications. So we definitely look forward to January 11th, where we'll be able to have that conversation with all of you. We recognize today that we were just providing an overview of the webinar, so we know that you're going to need some time with that document before you're ready to really share your thoughts and feedback. In addition to submitting comments, so in addition to this listening session, we'll also be asking for written comments by January 29th, which will be the end of a 60-day public comment period for this draft guide. And so there's an email address that we'll share later that you can send your comments to before that date. And, as we've said throughout, your comments and feedback are really crucial to supporting us to strengthen the draft, to make it more meaningful, and to make sure that it works for you and your communities. After that comment period closes, our teams will work to revise the draft based on your input and continue working to develop submission and review processes, which we've begun, but really look forward to hearing from you all about what that might look like. We will also be planning for technical assistance resources and supports that will accompany the draft guide or the final guide once we release it. And then the revised application guide will be released again for a 30-day public comment period in the spring. So that'll be kind of the final version that will be open for additional comments. And then we will make any additional revisions based on that public comment period and aim to publish the final version along with the full process for submitting by next summer. Next slide. So we talked about submitting public comments. We did publish the Federal Register notice on November 30th for this draft application guide. And so there's a 60-day public comment period. And so you can submit comments to infocollection@acf.hhs.gov. As I shared earlier, the draft application guide is available on the website that Lisa provided a link to, and it's also in the chat. So Daniela has posted the link to view the Federal Register notice if you're interested in reviewing that. And then she's also posted in the chat the link to the website where you can find the draft application guide. You can also request it directly from that email address if you prefer. And so the comment period will be open through January 29th, 2024. Next slide. And then again, here is the information about the upcoming listening session where you will have the chance to provide comments and feedback directly to our teams on the draft. So hopefully before then you'll have a chance to review it in more detail now that we've kind of gone through it and provided an overview. And we really look forward to your feedback on ways to strengthen the draft application guide for tribes that are using both Head Start and CCDF funds for tribal early childhood facilities. We look forward to hearing from you on administrative processes and TA resources and supports that should accompany the guide that'll make it more useful for you. And we also welcome any other recommendations on how to streamline tribal facilities project application processes in general. I know many of you have been through these processes before, so anything you'd like to share about your past experiences or what would make the process better, we really would appreciate hearing from you. So this listening session is on the guide, but it's also broader than that. And we really, look forward to hearing from you about your overall thoughts on how to improve facilities, application submission and review processes, and the overall processes for constructing and renovating and improving facilities. And then you can find the registration information for this listening session in the chat, and I will just, yes, so it looks like Daniela has posted that in the chat as well, so we look forward to seeing you there. And now I will open it up to the next slide. So want to take some time to answer any clarifying questions you may have. So just recognizing we may not have answers to a lot of your questions right now, but we will be taking note of your questions, and we plan to post a frequently asked questions document on our website. So you're welcome to ask a question here today, either in the chat or by coming on audio, or you can contact our email address, tribalecd@acf.hhs.gov, with any questions you may have. And as I said, we plan to post an FAQ on our website as we receive questions. So now I'll open it up and see if there are any immediate clarifying questions that would be helpful. So as I said, please feel free to write your question in the chat or come off mute and raise it.
I just have one question. So you're basically combining 477 funds and OHS funds during this process. So does that have anything to do with your 477 plan? Does the facilities part of this need to be wrote into the 477 plan prior to ever putting in an application that combines these funds?
So I don't know, Noelle, if you want to just address in general the the situation for people who are 477 grantees proposing to use CCDF funds?
Typically when we have a tribal aid agency that has a 477 plan, they have a placeholder in what would be considered the quality portion of the plan if they were direct funded that says they intend or they would like to pursue a construction or a facilities project. One of the important things is it does not guarantee, so that when we issue the approval letter, we always say that that does not mean that they can go forward and construct. If for some reason a tribal aid agency does not have that in the plan, they can always go back and add it. So it's not necessarily a prerequisite, but there have been in our recent plans, those lines included.
Okay. Because so I don't have access to any of the tribe's 477 funds right now. And so the feedback I was getting from the program manager that does distribute those funds, or I guess runs the childcare portion of our tribal business, says that the 477 funds have to be shown that only 477 funds are used for childcare, and that it cannot bleed over into Head Start in any way, shape, or form. Right? It has to be so completely separated. And so I understand the cost allocation and stuff. You're saying, okay, the kids are here this long. How much is the CCDF? Blah, blah, blah. But what she's saying is it has to, nope, this is childcare. This is Head Start. So I guess I'm just asking you, is that true? Or is it just the cost allocation piece of it where you have to write up the cost allocation plan? Because eventually, if we plan on doing any of this, of course, I'm gonna have to work with her. So I need to be able to know you're let me explain it to you.
Is your name Jeannie? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Jeannie, what we can do is I can get your contact information and we can follow up offline, because this is the great first steps to actually even talking through an application. And we'll likely, since you are 477, need to involve your AOTR, your person that contacted BIA. Which tribe are you with?
Caldwell Tribe.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm just asking out of curiosity because sometimes when I talk to if I don't actually know anything about what they're doing, I have no answers. When they say no, I just say, oh, okay. No, you guys know, because I don't do those ones.
Yeah, and there's probably going to peel back some more later. So we'll definitely reach out to you offline. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
It looks like we have a question from Denise Harvey.
Good afternoon. This is Denise Harvey. I'm a tribal council leader for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I was just curious if there is any funding opportunities for new construction. We do receive CCDF funds and have a HUD early childhood facility, but we're in the process of planning and building a new facility due to our wait lists that we've had for years. And I'm just wondering, I got on late, so I didn't hear if there was funding available for new construction, or I did hear the comments about the modular and facility improvements, but I was just curious if there's an opportunity for new construction funding.
So there's basically for CCDF, the construction funds are set aside from the overall CCDF awards. So each tribal lead agency submits a request to the Office of Child Care to set aside those funds, which are part of their overall allocation. For Office of Head Start, the tribe would approach the Office of Head Start, or in this, well, I'll open to Todd since he's come off camera.
Thanks, Moshmi. And good afternoon, Councilwoman Harvey, and good to see you again.
Hi.
Yes, as Moshmi was indicating, for the Office of Head Start, our programs can at any time submit additional funding requests, supplemental funding. And so normally most of our facilities are funded through this manner, where a program will submit what we call a one-time supplement to fund a cost that is not considered an ongoing operation cost. One of the things that we kind of discussed briefly at a higher level at the beginning was the differences in funding between childcare and Head Start. So, as part of that, there would be a childcare set aside, and then through the Head Start portion, you would actually be requesting one-time funding, additional funds to support a facility project. Is that
Okay,
helpful?
yeah, thank you. I'll send this over to my director and my grant manager and let them sort through that. I know we do have some funding for the project, but I know there's a pretty large portion of that that is not funded. So that's why I was seeing if there's additional money now that wasn't there previously, or we've already received some of that funding for that. So that's why I was asking.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, feel free to type in the chat. How will the combined application be submitted? So we are working through that process right now, but it will be a single point of submission. So you will not be submitting a separate application to one office and a separate application to the other. So we look forward to sharing more about that process as we continue to work through it.
Hi, Moshmi and team. This is Dolores. I'm representing out of the Tribal Capacity Building Center as an SME for physical, but I do have a question. Is there some prerequisites that are to be done by both lead agencies to consider the application should they decide they want to move forward with this type of combining a facility or new renovation?
So I think the main prerequisite is to have that initial pre-application conversation with the Office of Head Start and the Office of Child Care. At least that's the process that we've laid out in the draft guide. And so during that conversation, there will be an opportunity to share about the goals for the project and to talk through any potential issues that might be coming up. But I don't know if anybody in Office of Child Care, Office of Head Start would like to provide any information you have on prerequisites that you're aware of.
I was just thinking in reference to should this presentation be provided to lead agencies? It does look like at some point it probably will.
Mhm.
Maybe they should at least be given some prerequisitions of pre-strategies of what can be put ahead of them in order to really consider this particular application. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
So there's a question on, since there's no new construction funds from OHS, can CCDF funds only be used to construct? So both funds can be used. The only thing is with the Head Start that you're requesting a one-time award to do the construction projects, not necessarily that there are no funds available, but that it will be a one-time award based on the request and the availability of funds. And Donald, we can continue to discuss that within our teams, if that makes sense. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, please, as I said, feel free to email us at this email address if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share. If you have comments on the draft guide, you would share those at the info collection at acf.hhs.gov email address that we've shared. And that's in the Federal Register notice. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to hear about this draft application guide. We really look forward to hearing your comments, your feedback, your suggestions for how to improve the draft, your suggestions for the process that we should use to review these applications. We hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season and a happy new year. And we hope to see you in January at our listening session on January 11th. So please register for that. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.